And I are back for the final section of the show, and there has been a very heated debate that has been ongoing even off air. And to get back to that, let's listen into what the president did say on corruption, on graft, one of those things mandated to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. This is what President Uhuru Kenyatta had to say on the challenge of corruption.
The government and the private sector also must report fraud, protect whistleblowers without the slightest hesitation. Kenyans, on their part too, must report any crimes they may come across. And indeed, families must feel ashamed by one of their members becoming involved in corruption, and they must insist on upholding the name of their family. Teachers, as well as parents, must explicitly teach our children the value of honesty and the concept of honor.
All right, President Kenyatta, speaking about corruption, gentlemen, does this end that debate on institutionalizing these things, morality, whatever you may call it?
You see, the president has just talked about socialization. He's talked about families being embarrassed of their members who participate in corruption. He's talked about society becoming the whistleblowers, not the glorifiers of people who participate in this vice. What Kenya needs is a resocialization. If the DPP is going to be able to deliver, he needs to feel that he's got the goodwill of the people and the political goodwill to operate in that environment. The reason why these institutions have worked in Brazil, they're working in South Africa and South Korea. Let us be reminded that the people of South Korea demonstrated for almost a year to get justice. The people of Brazil did the same thing. Malema and the rest have been fighting for this. You cannot achieve social change by reason of having a law. It does not work.
Right.
You must re-socialize your population. And that's what the president is doing.
Husband?
But I think what the president is doing is setting the ball rolling for a conversation that will be centered on things that add value to this nation. That if you're going to talk about corruption, if it is bad, it should be bad for everyone. If my family member is involved in corruption, it should be bad. If somebody else's family member is involved in corruption, it should be bad. And to look at it broadly, you're asking yourself, from here, where do we go? Now that the president has said that, what do we do? And I think that is where we are, that we need to understand, with this political goodwill, what are the frameworks in place that will give Kenyans an opportunity now to do all that? You don't expect that people are just going all of a sudden to behave in a certain way because the president did that. People are socialized, and people learn things. People need an avenue where they're going to learn this. People need to understand corruption in its very little sense, so that when they get to a place where corruption is grand, they also understand that the way it was bad in its little sense, this grand corruption is bad. And you still have to get an opportunity to exercise that.
I want 10 seconds of how this can happen suddenly. If today your pastor at church stopped kicking out people for having sex with each other and kicked out politicians who are corrupt, this country will begin to change.
All right. Do you agree with all this?
You know, it's not in the mandate of a pastor, or in my case, a priest, to determine whether or not somebody has stolen.
But they determine when people have had sex with each other.
Calm down.
Which world do you live in?
No, relax. Let me clear this. We've got institutional frameworks. Year in, year out, the Auditor General comes up with a report which says resources have been stolen, both at the national government and county government. That alone is sufficient evidence for the DPP or CID to swing into action. And what we need in Kenya is consequences for stealing. Right now, there's no consequence for stealing. If you steal, going by Bichachi's mathematics, you go to church today, you will be given a seat right at the front, and when you give sadaka, you're going to be showered with praise. Yes. However, the pastor has no ability to tell whether or not you are a thief. We have institutional frameworks which will determine whether or not you've stolen. Right. Like, let's go to South Korea. Maybe the local priest for that president knew she's a thief. But you know, the pastor wouldn't do anything till the legal justice system works. And the Kipchumba is a lawyer, will tell you, you cannot go to the top of Mount Kenya and shout, XYZ is a thief. No, you have to go through the system. And when you're found guilty, you are committed.
All right,
that is the bottom line.
Let us leave it there. Let us leave it there. One final thing. The president also did speak about the various arms of government. Of course, there has been a lot of clashing between especially the executive and the judiciary, especially after or following that disputed presidential election, especially after that Supreme Court verdict that nullified the President Uhuru Kenyatta's win in August the 8th. Let's listen into what he said about the various arms of government.
To cast our minds to last year's political competition. Kenyans twice cast their votes in peace, and in the end, I believe the result reflected the will of the people and respected the law of the land. Our institutions held firm. To our judiciary, I can only ask that your independence be joined to even greater effort on your part to ensure that your arm of government attains the highest standards of conduct and integrity, that it never loses sight of the interdependence of all arms and levels of government.
Kipchumba, the president did not apologize to the judiciary for calling them wakora. But from that, what is your takeaway in terms of the president's state of how he wants, as the executive, to relate with especially the judiciary?
Ben, if I understood well the apology the president offered during the State of the Nation, it was to everybody. And I think the judiciary fell in between. It was not in him to start now giving specific that I apologize to Ben Kitili for passing by your place. I apologize to Dismas Mokua for not looking at you and smiling. It was not in him to do that. What was supposed to be done was just a blanket apology. It is of its own kind. I think the only person who has done this before is President Moi, when he did it during the Jamhuri Day celebration, the 202 Jamhuri Day. I think it is a good thing. It should be encouraged. We should also encourage our leaders to come down from the ivory tower that they live, that they are these big men, they are colossal, they are pedagogical in nature. And to come back to the issue of supremacy battles between judiciary, executive, and the legislature, they will always be there. The teething problems will always be there. It is for us as a nation to find a middle ground and to know that the judiciary can harm to this end and the parliament can harm this, so that the song can come out with a rhythm, and the rhythm being the nation. And the beat of that song must be to push us to the front and not to drag us behind. And I think looking at this thing holistically, the issue of the dispute that has been there between the judiciary and what have you, we also call back to we need a social engineering as a nation, so that when today we say so-and-so is a judge, we view them with the honor that the office brings about, so that you do not think that so-and-so can take a bribe, and they act in a manner that they are beyond reproach.
All right. Hesbon, do you think the stage is set for independence of each of the three arms of government?
Well, I think, all these different government agencies actually operate against the backdrop of political goodwill. And that is what the president has done. He has set a stage where everything will be transparent. The interdependence between the different arms of the government will actually be beneficial to the greater good of the country. And I think most importantly, I think the president should have address the issue of civil society, because you cannot have this interdependence and independence of these different arms of the government without a very vibrant and self-regenerating civil society. And in as much as you're saying that he apologized globally, I think there was a lot of damage that was done to the civil society, and the president did not touch on that. And the civil society is very critical for a functioning democracy and for providing checks and balances on how these three arms of the government check and balance each other.
All right. Mark?
If there's a statement of maturity that has come from the Deputy President, is the accommodation of different ideas. And I think Kenya needs to get to that space where if someone thinks different than you, they are not your enemy. If someone supports a different party, a different ideology, they are not your enemy. The space we've been operating at is that it's anytime there's been a contrary opinion to anybody, then you are considered to be an enemy either of the state or an enemy of the judiciary and things like that. What needs to happen in this country is this. Number one, civil society needs to stop being seen as the automatic enemy of government. That's number one. Number two, the apparent enmity between the judiciary and the executive is a rollover effect where the judiciary in the past used to be an extension of the executive. But that independence does not then mean that you need to say no to everything. We are behaving almost like teenagers. You know, when your father tells you to go to sleep, you just want to say no. If you're asked why, you don't quite know yet. Now, independence must be accompanied by maturity. This is how it works. That for as long as the executive is doing the right thing, then both parliament and the judiciary should be okay. The moment the executive does something wrong, then both parliament and the judiciary should be very un-okay. The posture is what needs to change, and that's what we are discussing here. There needs to be a common ground that for as long as we are headed in this direction, we are fine. And that's what needs to happen. We need to, I think Kenya is going through a teenage phase, and we need to grow up a bit and understand that independence does not mean disagreement at every turn. And that's why even when there was a handshake, the first question was, will Parliament be able to provide oversight? Enmity is not the only way to provide oversight. You can provide oversight and be someone's best friend. In fact, that's how it's supposed to be, that the person closest to you should be your harshest critic, because then you're able to work rightly. And more so, we need to have our politicians stop surrounding themselves with people who surrendered their brains at the altars of position. They need to surround themselves with people who can look them in the eye and say, sir, excuse me, you're going absolutely wrong. Surrounding yourself by fools, proverb says, but when a king surrounds himself by liars, wickedness runs in the country. So we need kings who surround themselves with wise counsel, not foolishness.
Great scripture for the day also. Dismas, the final thoughts.
But then, you know, Mark has said things which should worry Kenyans. Is he suggesting that President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga are surrounded by people of a questionable integrity? You don't need to answer that question. Let me go ahead and make my stage.
That same trap.
No.
Just because we disagree does not mean you need to fight everything.
You're eating into my time. Now, the second thing, the civil society does not consider the government to be an enemy. It's actually the government which considers civil society to be an enemy. And one must thank the president this time round. He did not attack individual judges. He made a position about the judiciary that wherever they're making their wherever they're giving their orders are supposed to be consistent with the public interest and the public good, which I think is a very good idea. But making progress, let me use this opportunity to ask President Kenyatta to institutionalize that handshake so that all Kenyans, because I suspect all of us have got views on how Kenya needs to make progress, and also make sure that it's diverse. Having octogenarians in that panel is not sufficient. You need to have a gentleman like Owila or Kipchumba, because, you know, the future is for these two gentlemen. They're the ones.
Very good point. I have to agree. Very good point. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your very qualified perspectives and insights on various issues affecting the Republic. Many thanks. Dismas Mokua, political risk analyst, communication expert and political analysts, Mark Bichache, and Hesbon Owila, lawyer and political strategist, Kipchumba Karori. Thank you. Let's do this again next Sunday. That's why we leave it on the program. Be sure to join us next Sunday, same time, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. as we dissect the biggest stories, the biggest political and governance issues in the Republic. I'm Ben Kitili. Up next is Weekend at 1 with Zinzi Kibiku. Don't go too far.